So apparently, the Hearthstone Hall of Fame is dead, or soon to be dead anyway, according to this confusing trail of events that's unfolded in the last day or so. We got word from Blizzard that the Hall of Fame as we know it will no longer exist in the near future, and I want to talk about what exactly that might mean. But to get there first, I want to break down how exactly all this news unfolded. So, starting off yesterday, Blizzard posted the Edwin nerf update that hit yesterday, and one of the Hearthstone designers, Alec Dawson, left a comment on the tweet that said, "Sorry this didn't get into the patch notes, but Edwin will rotate later this year, and yes, we will be reverting the nerf, along with others at that time." So, number one, that's actually some news that Edwin's nerf will be reverted in presumably wild format, along with other cards, maybe nerf this year, maybe other classic cards, we don't know. But some people, of course, took that information because the only time classic cards normally rotate is through the Hall of Fame. And a Reddit post said, Alec Dawson confirms that Edwin Van Cleef will be Hall of Famed this year. And Alec jumped in and clarified, I did not confirm that. He did not confirm that Edwin will be Hall of Famed. Please be patient until more info is shared. Some exciting new stuff this year. And forgive me as I look over to read this. There was a clarification made that, as Ridiculous Hat put it really well on Twitter, and I'll put this up, Edwin has not been confirmed to be Hall of Famed, but Edwin has been confirmed for rotation. That's an interesting difference because that would never be possible in the current system. So Alec took to Twitter to further clarify said comments and said, want to take a second to clarify our plan for Edwin Van Cleef. There are big changes coming to Hearthstone in 2021. That's presumably the classic rework they've been teasing for a while, kind of like what they did with Priest, but they've said basically the whole classic and basic set are up for grabs. He says, we aren't quite ready to share the full details, but they will be positive changes for both gameplay and the ease of getting into the game with a limited collection. So that's interesting. And he adds, as one small part of this, Edwin's time and standard will come to a close. However, Hall of Fame as it has existed will be no more. This means there is no additional benefit to crafting or hoarding extra Edwin. So of note, if you did see part of this news, but not all of it, don't hold your Edwin until rotation for the Hall of Fame. If you want to get the dust off your Edwins, you should do it during the refund period. Basically, right now, or as soon as the refund period is close to ending, you should dust your Edwin for max refund status. Alec adds, in the coming months, we'll be sharing some more details about what the changes are and why you should be hyped for them no matter what type of player you are. So let's break down all the important components there. Number one is no Hall of Fame. Number two, changes coming to gameplay. I think since we're talking about things like rotations and all of that, I think that's probably in relation to the meta and not things like, the client getting improved or animations or those sorts of things. I think we're talking about meta gameplay. And then ease of getting into the game with a limited collection. Now, it's hard to envision what exactly that means, but it sounds like the game's going to be more accessible and affordable for people. Now, of course, we've been teased giant sweeping changes before with things like the rewards track / battle pass, and people didn't come away from that one super happy. So until we see these in execution, of course, I would encourage you to be hopeful, but with some hesitation. Of course, just observe and react as we get details on these sorts of things. But at least teased some nice improvements here. It doesn't sound like something they're ashamed to talk about or not looking forward to. Usually they kind of try to tuck things away if they're not super happy about it. And this one's like right out in the open. They're calling it out like, hey, there's some big stuff coming. So I'm naturally a little bit hopeful with hesitation. Now, to bounce off of that and take it even further, Ridiculous Hat went another level here and did some detective work. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'm sharing it here. If Edwin's rotating, but he's not going to the Hall of Fame, that might mean the entire classic and basic sets in Hearthstone, or maybe just the classic set that Edwin's a part of, could be rotating to wild format in lieu of something like a rotating core set, which Brian Kibler's been asking for like 75 years, I think. And what that means, if you don't understand what that means, is so instead of having a set in stone classic set that's always in standard format, what would happen instead is you'd have cards that become the classic or the basics core functional set, and those remain in standard format, but they change over time. So maybe they're there for a year, and then in another year you bring in a different set of cards. And what that means is the meta has a lot more flexibility. Blizzard can design things that don't have to play around certain classic and basic card limitations, so there's less limitation of design space, and that could be awesome. And I think that might be what Alec is referencing when he says things like positive gameplay changes. Now, of course, there's a couple ways you could take that. You could have a bunch of new cards printed for something like a core set. I don't know if Blizzard would go that route just because that's so many cards. If you wanted to have the same number that were in Classic and Basic, or even a significant fraction thereof, that'd just be so much design work. I don't know if Blizzard's capable of putting out that many distinct new designs, particularly on a regular cadence. What I think we might see instead is like a tiny fraction subset of cards and a mix of Classic and Basic cards right now. You might have Frostbolt, but not Fireball. And the next year you might have Fireball and not Frostbolt. But you could also go the whole route where all Classic and Basic cards are just moved to Wild, and instead there's a totally new core set to replace them. Maybe that's pulled from old expansions, so you bring in some Whispers of the Old Gods cards that you like, or maybe you kind of reprint those cards with a new skin. And all these possibilities exist as a replacement for Classic and Basic. I mean, to be frank, like that's a pretty big ask. Like that's an enormous change. It's not exactly in line with what Blizzard proposed, which was a rework of the Classic set. It kind of sounded like cards were going to change. So maybe they just mean like Edwin is going to get adjusted, and that's kind of how they're wording it or framing it, like he's going to rotate, but they really mean he's just going to change or get updated in some way, or reskinned potentially. Maybe it becomes Vanessa Van Cleef and the mechanic changes. We don't exactly know. But I saw another tweet here that I think lends a little bit of credence to this entire conversation, which is on this ridiculous hat post, which I know I'm going back to a lot. Shout out Hat. He's awesome. Ixar replied with a GIF, sort of the, doing the math GIF sort of thing based on the ridiculous hat conclusions and suggestions that were made, which I don't know. I feel like that's kind of playfully saying like, maybe you're on to something. Or alternatively, maybe it's saying like, look at this guy. He's so ridiculous doing all this math and not figuring things out. So I guess it could kind of go either way. I'll let you guys come to your conclusions. So at the end of the day, the only thing we know for sure, based on what we were told, is that the Hall of Fame, as we know it, is going away. Everything beyond that is speculation. So will Classic as a whole be rotated? Will there be a core set to replace it? We don't know those questions. Maybe just the Hall of Fame's going away and nothing else is happening. I don't think that's likely based on the kind of positive language that Alec utilized. I don't know that he would go to the trouble to say all these exciting things if all that was really happening is you were losing your dust in the Hall of Fame that you would normally get. A lot to break down, not a lot to really, certify at this stage that we know as true, but it sounds like there's the potential for some enormous changes this year. And I will say the one thing that really concerns me is that if the classic set were to rotate in place of a core set, I sure hope you don't have to buy or open the core set cards in packs. My God, if we lost all of our classic and basic cards and had to get like replacements that we had to pay for functionally, that would be bad. But hopefully there's just like a 1-to-1 swap maybe where we just lose classic cards and then get, replacements or core cards or whatever, or at least our classic cards remain functional for a while. But I mean, for now, it's too early to worry about that because we don't know if that's the thing that's going to happen. It may be something much smaller. And in fact, I think it probably will be something much smaller. I just can't envision Blizzard swapping out the entire classic set. It's just so much identity and it's so iconic to Hearthstone and people love it. And it's just too much work to replace that many cards or even a significant fraction of that many cards. It's like printing an expansion or two. I just think it's too much. How many cards are actually in the classic set? Hold up, let me Let me look. And we don't know if we're talking about classic or basic, but I'm kind of assuming all as the prior evergreen cards. Classic and basic. So classic had 240 cards and basic had 143. So yeah, we're talking about 2+ expansions worth of work to replace those. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to provide all of those for like a core set, but you'd probably need a large chunk to make it compelling. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll see like parts of classic rotated in and out, of which Edwin will be a part that gets rotated but not moved to the Hall of Fame, is my estimation. And maybe we'll see, you know, a smaller set of cards printed to replace those as a part of the core set. But again, that may not even be what's happening. It's just all speculation based on one Twitter post here, and a handful of people on Reddit are thinking the same thing as well. So fair bit of additional conversation there. But anyway, I'll let you make that of what you will. And I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about this. I'm sure this is the sort of stuff we'd hear about at the BlizzCon that's coming in February. So stay tuned around then. I'm sure we'll get more news. Alex said coming months. So that sounds like it's at least a couple months away, which doesn't really necessarily line up with February, but sooner rather than later. Hopefully, in the meantime, we got the mini set to get us by. So all that said, looking forward to hearing what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below. But until then, thanks so much for watching. And until next time, game on.